In today's case, we're going to talk about a man who was nicknamed the Tattoo Man on the streets of Canada because his entire body was covered in tattoos, and he loved to show them off. Due to his numerous problems, he was imprisoned, and after some time, he was released. I wish they hadn't released him, because he came back worse than before and committed several crimes. Let's get to know this person and find out what misfortunes and crimes he committed after his release. If you're watching this video for the first time, I hope you scroll down, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. Don't forget to grab some snacks and light treats to enjoy while listening to the story before you cozy up and drift off into dreamland. Why not drop a comment below and share where in the world you're tuning in from? Now, let's get comfy, relax, and dive into tonight's tale. Ready? Let's begin it. Monday, January 22nd, 1990. In Ontario, we'll get to know a man named Albert Phillips, who was 60 years old. Albert was married and had one daughter, who was 15 years old. He worked as a cleaner downtown. On that day, his wife and daughter were asleep, and as usual, he woke up early to head to work. It was around 5 a.m. when he left for work. By 7:30 a.m., his wife woke up and called him, but there was no answer. She then called his workplace. The reason she reached out was that she felt something was wrong, because her husband, Kel, I always called her at 6 a.m. to wake her up after leaving at 5 a.m. that day. She was surprised to wake up at 7:30 a.m. with no call from him. After calling him with no response, she contacted someone she knew at his workplace and asked him to check on Albert. This person went looking for Albert, first checking his main work area, but couldn't find him. He then went to the attendant's recording area and was shocked to find Albert lying face down on the ground, covered in blood. Albert was still breathing, but the blow he had taken was severe. His colleague, who worked in the same group or company, immediately called an ambulance and the police. When the paramedics arrived, they treated Albert and took him to the hospital. Poor Albert was suffering from multiple fractures ribs and even his skull. It was clear that the person who attacked him had a strong grudge against Albert. When the doctors examined him, they frankly stated that they didn't think he would survive due to the severity of the injuries. He had internal bleeding and fractures. His poor wife was waiting for a call from her husband or his colleague to reassure her about Albert's condition. Unfortunately, she received a call that was the opposite of what she expected. She was informed that her husband had been assaulted and was between life and death. At that moment, his wife and daughter broke down in tears, asking why Albert had been attacked. He was a peaceful man who had no problems with anyone, no enemies. He even helped the homeless, giving them food and money despite his modest income. He never neglected his family, but he still helped the homeless, those you see in movies sleeping under bridges. Anyway, he used to help them. The police began searching the scene for evidence. The investigators discovered that Albert had arrived at work that morning, parked his car, and headed to the attendant's recording office before starting his work. As he entered the office to record his attendance, he was struck on the head with a powerful blow. It was said that the force of the blow knocked out the dental implants Albert had. The iron tool used in the assault was found nearby, next to the dental implants that had fallen out of Albert's mouth. The investigators continued searching for more evidence. Outside, in the parking lot, they found Albert's wallet, which was completely empty. The attacker had stolen everything inside. Among the evidence found in the area was a hanging bag. They were puzzled by this bag. When they opened it, they found women's clothing and some personal items. Thought it was strange. Why would a bag like this be hanging in the parking lot? They took it as evidence. When the investigators searched for Albert Phillips' car, they couldn't find it. As for the other cars in the parking lot, their windows were broken and some items were stolen. Let's return to the hospital and check on Albert's condition. The police will surely ask us some questions to identify who assaulted him. When the investigators arrived, They were shocked to find that Albert had passed away. He couldn't withstand the severity of the blows and died. Now, let's move to a small town near Ontario called St. Catharines. At around 10 p.m., a 28-year-old woman named Sandy Beloz had a simple errand to run before heading home. When she arrived at the bank, she parked her car, got out, and noticed a man sitting in his car, staring at her and smiling. She smiled back politely and went inside. After finishing her errand, she returned to her car and saw the same man still, sitting in his car, staring at her. This man was in a station wagon, which matched the description of Albert Phillips' car. When Sandy noticed the man still staring at her, she got into her car as soon as she did. The man got out of his car and ran towards her. He opened her car door, pointed a knife at her neck, and told her to move to the passenger seat. He threatened her, saying that if she made any move, he would kill her. Sandy started crying, begging him not to kill her, saying she had family and loved ones. The man told her to listen and promised that if she cooperated, he wouldn't kill her. He just wanted to escape from the police before they caught him. Sandy agreed to cooperate. He told her that if they encountered any checkpoints or the police, she should pretend to be his wife or girlfriend. That's all he wanted from her, or Sandy agreed, saying she had no problem with that. They drove for about 2 hours without anyone stopping them. The man decided to drive into a remote area surrounded by farms. He stopped the car, and Sandy felt the danger. She looked at him and reminded him of his promise not to harm her. He replied that he had promised not to kill her but hadn't promised anything else. He said he wouldn't let her go until he had assaulted her. A struggle ensued between them, with Sandy screaming and trying to defend herself. Suddenly, by the grace of God, a farmer who was nearby on his tractor noticed the car and approached it. When the farmer got closer, the kidnapper noticed him and told Sandy to pretend to be his girlfriend. Sandy took advantage of the situation, opened the car door, and got out. She was completely naked. The farmer saw this and realized she was being held against her will. At that moment, the ground was covered in snow, and poor Sandy could barely run. Imagine running in the snow, naked and freezing. She tried to run towards the farmer for help, but the kidnapper caught up with her and started beating her violently. The farmer, seeing this, couldn't stand by. He grabbed an axe he had with him and ran towards the kidnapper. The kidnapper, seeing the farmer approaching, jumped off Sandy, got back into his car, and drove away. The farmer, running after him, managed to catch up and broke the car window, reaching inside to grab the kidnapper. The kidnapper, in a panic, drove off, but the farmer held on. Eventually, the farmer fell off the car and went back to help Sandy. He tried to assist her, seeing that she had suffered severe blows and bruises. The farmer then ran back to his tractor and returned to his farm to call the police. Meanwhile, the kidnapper managed to disappear from sight, trying to hide in the nearest turn he could find. He drove into a farm, but his car got stuck in the snow. He tried to free the car and continue his escape, but he couldn't. The car was stuck. By the grace of God, he got out of the car and ran to the nearest house. When he arrived, he broke down the door and found an elderly woman inside. He threatened her with a knife, demanding the keys to her car. The poor woman, terrified, handed over the keys, and he took her car and fled. You'd think he would try to hide, but instead went to a bank and robbed it. Can you believe it? While on the run from the police and authorities, he went and robbed the bank in broad daylight. He had no fear. Meanwhile, the farmer, after 2 hours, finally managed to call the police. His tractor was slow, and his farm was somewhat remote. When the police arrived, they found Sandy, who had suffered multiple injuries, not just blows, but also stab wounds from the knife when she tried to escape. The investigators were waiting for her to regain consciousness so they could get a description of her attacker. When she finally woke up and started recovering, the investigators came to her and asked her a few questions. They wanted to know if she recognized the man who attacked her. She said she didn't know him and explained that she had been at the bank to finish some errands. When she left the bank and got into her car, the man had attacked her. Indicators asked her to describe the location where she was parked and the car the man was driving. When the police went to that location, they found the car the attacker had been driving, and to their surprise, was Albert Phillips' car, the same car belonging to the elderly man who had been assaulted at his workplace. At this point, the investigators realized they were dealing with the same person who had killed Albert Phillips. They took the car to the police lab to examine it for fingerprints. After searching the car, they found several fingerprints, including one that was unusual. It didn't belong to Albert. This fingerprint was on the car door handling. The investigators believed it belonged to their suspect. However, in this small town, resources were limited, so they decided to send the fingerprint to Ottawa for further analysis. The local police handed over the fingerprint file to a trusted pilot who was familiar to them. They instructed him to deliver the file to Ottawa as soon as possible. The pilot took off and delivered the file to the authorities in Ottawa. There, they entered the fingerprint into their electronic database to see if it matched any known criminals. However, after searching their database, they found no match for the fingerprint. 2 days later, on Wednesday, January 24th, the police received a report about a missing girl in London, Ontario. Her name was Charlene Britten, and she was 25 years old. Charlene's family initially thought she was with her boyfriend, as she often disappeared for periods of time with him, whether on trips or otherwise. However, when her boyfriend couldn't find her for 3 days, he contacted her family and they realized something was wrong. They reported her missing to the police. The police began investigating, questioning people close to her, asking when they had last seen her. From this, they learned that the last time anyone saw Charlene, she was with a man who had long blonde hair and tattoos on his body. The police recognized these descriptions. They had heard them before from Sandy, the woman who had been assaulted and rescued by the farmer. Sandy had described her attacker as having blonde hair and tattoos. Police realized they were chasing a dangerous criminal who was causing them a lot of trouble. This person was increasing his attacks and crimes, and it was possible he would kill again. A few days later, the police received a call from an officer in another military sector. The officer said they suspected a person who might be the one the police were looking for. The police asked for the name of the suspect, and the officer said it was Peter John Peters. They believed Peter matched the description of the suspect. Peter was 28 years old and had a criminal record. He was known in the London, Ontario area as the Tattoo Man because he loved to walk around shirtless, showing off his tattoos. The police looked into Peter's files and found that he had a troubled past with a long criminal history: theft, assault, and more. He had been in prison before, but was released on parole. After confirming that Peter was the man who had kidnapped, Sandy and was driving Albert Phillips' car, as well as the last person seen with Charlene Britten before she disappeared, the police obtained a search warrant for Peter's apartment. When they arrived and searched his apparentity, didn't find Peter, but they did find a locked room. They broke the lock and opened the door, only to be horrified by what they saw inside. They found Charlene Britten's lifeless body, completely naked. The room was covered in disturbing images, large, explicit photos plastered all over the walls. The police were shocked by what they found. They collected their evidence and confirmed that Peter was indeed the man they were looking for. But where was he? Their mission now was to find him before he committed another crime, whether it was kidnapping, theft, or assault. Let's go back to the assault on Albert Phillips. Remember the bag I mentioned earlier? The one found in the parking lot that the police were puzzled about. That bag turned out to belong to Charlene Britten. This connection meant that Charlene had been assaulted first, followed by Albert Phillips. How did this happen, and why? We'll find out as the story continues. As for the fingerprints taken from Albert's car and sent to Ottawa for analysis, They didn't match anyone in the database. However, now that the police had a suspect, Peter, they decided to take his fingerprints from his apartment and compare them to the ones found on the car. They manually compared the fingerprints using a magnifying glass, and it turned out they were a match. 2 days after the police released Peter's photo and information, and about 100 kilometers from where he was last seen, a bus stopped and passengers got off. Among them was Peter. He got off the bus and started walking a short distance when he saw a woman cleaning snow off her car. He approached her and said, "Listen, get in the car, okay? I have a knife and I'll kill you with it. Get in the car." The woman, however, managed to escape. She was brave and didn't panic. She ran as fast as she could, and Peter couldn't catch her. His goal was to steal her car. He got into her car, started it, and drove off, fearing that the woman would call the police. Since he had stolen her car, he knew the police would be looking for it. He decided to abandon the car and find another one. He went to a house where a young man lived, broke in, and demanded the keys to the man's car and a weapon. Scared, said he didn't have a car, but handed over a shotgun belonging to his family. Asterisk at the same time, Peter looked out the window and saw 2 people standing near the car he had just abandoned. He loaded the shotgun and fired at them, but the young man's father bravely intervened, telling Peter not to kill them. He said, "Please, don't kill them. I haven't done anything to you. Let them go, and I'll help you find another car." Peter listened to him and lowered the weapon. The father then led Peter to another house nearby, where 2 men were sitting together. Peter threatened them with a shotgun, demanding the keys to their car. One of the men calmly handed over the keys, and Peter took the car and fled. Before leaving, he smashed the phone and cut the phone lines to prevent anyone from calling the police. The 3 men, wanting to report what had happened, had to run to the nearest house to call the police. When the police arrived, they showed them Peter's photo, and the men confirmed that he was the one who had threatened them. The police then issued a bulletin with a description of the stolen car, warning everyone to be on the lookout for Peter, the criminal they had been searching for. At 4 p.m. that same day, a police car was parked on the side of the road, monitoring traffic, hoping to catch the criminal. Suddenly, they spotted the stolen car and began following it from a distance. They alerted other officers and set up roadblocks. Peter, driving the stolen car, thought he had escaped, but he soon found himself facing a massive checkpoint. Overwhelmed by fear, he got out of the car, threw down the shotgun, and lay on the ground, surrendering. The police quickly arrested him. During the interrogation, Peter confessed to everything. He didn't deny any of the charges against him. The investigators, and surely you as well, must be wondering what motivated these crimes. Why did he kill Charlene and assault Albert Phillips? In his confession, Peter explained that he had been in a relationship with a woman he loved, but she had left him, sent him into a deep depression. When he met Charlene, he became attached to her, but she also decided to end the relationship. This pushed him over the edge, and he killed her in a fit of rage. After killing her, he took her money and belongings, including the bag found in the parking lot. He then went downtown, waiting for the first car to come by so he could attack the driver and steal their car. Fortunately, the first person to arrive was Albert Phillips. Peter attacked him, took his keys and money, stole some cars, and fled. Peter, the tattoo man, confessed to all the crimes he was accused of. The charges against him weren't just for murder. There were over 30 charges, including theft, kidnapping, assault, and more. After a swift trial, Peter John Peters was sentenced to 3 life sentences. This man would spend the rest of his life in prison. And with that, we reached the end of today's story. 4 armed robbers entered a bank in Argentina and took hostages. The police surrounded the place. After several hours of negotiation, the robbers announced they would surrender on one condition: that the police bring them pizza. The pizza arrived, but suddenly, the robbers cut off all communications with the police. The police decided to storm the bank, but inside, there was no one except the hostages. When they went downstairs, they found the bank vault looted, with no trace of the robbers or how they escaped. There was no tunnel in the ground or any visible exit. The police immediately suspected the hostages, thinking the robbers might be hiding among them. So, were the robbers really hiding among the hostages? Where did they go exactly? That's what we'll find out in today's story. Peace be upon you. In 2006, the largest bank heist in Argentina was executed, sophisticated and complex operation. The robbers who carried out this heist were 4 individuals. The first was Fernando Araham, the leader of the operation. The second was the engineer. The third was Beto de la Torre, whom we'll call the financier. And the fourth was Luis, nicknamed the Violent One. There were also 2 others who helped them from the outside, though their identities remain unknown. We'll refer to them as the Doctor and the Kid. Remember these 4 names because I've given each of them a nickname to make it easier to follow the story. The story begins with Fernando, the leader and mastermind of the operation. One day, Fernando visited a psychologist and told him, "I want to rob a bank." The doctor was surprised, assuming Fernando was just talking nonsense under the influence of marijuana, which he frequently smoked. The doctor asked, "Why do you want to rob a bank? Is it for money?" Fernando replied, "No, I don't need money. But you know me, I'm an artist. I love art, and I feel like I can create a great masterpiece in the world of bank robberies." The doctor asked, "And how do you plan to execute this heist?" Fernando responded, "I don't know yet, but this idea consumes my entire being. I think about it before I sleep, after I wake up, and every moment of my day. I want to rob a bank." The doctor thought it was just the marijuana talking, but little did he know, Fernando was serious. He went on to execute the smartest and largest bank robbery in the streets of Buenos Aires, Argentina's capital. To explore potential targets, he scouted around and eventually found a bank called Banco Rio, located in a very wealthy area bank where the rich kept their valuables, money, and precious belongings. Fernando then began brainstorming ways to carry out the heist. The first method was to storm the bank while it was open, take the cash from the tellers, and leave quickly before the police arrived. However, this method was highly risky and offered limited gains, since they wouldn't have time to raid the vault. They'd have to leave quickly before the police arrived. The second method was to break into the bank when it was closed, which typically involved digging a tunnel underground to reach the vault. But this method also had its problems. It could be easily discovered because the bank had heat sensors in advance, alarm systems that would detect intrusions into the vault while it was locked. Both methods were difficult and highly dangerous. Fernando realized that if he was going to risk everything, he needed to ensure the biggest possible payoff. This meant he would have to dig a tunnel to access the vault while the bank was closed. At first, considered renting a ground floor apartment or a warehouse near the bank and digging a tunnel from there to the vault. But then, Fernando stumbled upon a pleasant surprise during one of his reconnaissance trips. He noticed sewer grates. Along the street in front of the bank, every 10 meters or so, there was a manhole. This meant there was already an underground network passing directly in front of the bank. These tunnels led all the way to a drainage outlet about 150 meters from the bank. Fernando had found a ready-made tunnel. Without wasting time, Fernando entered the sewer system and began exploring. Initially, the tunnel was square-shaped, but after walking about 100 meters, he reached a circular tunnel about 6 meters in diameter, a massive underground passage extending beneath the city and running directly past the bank. Now, Fernando needed help because executing this operation alone was impossible. The first person who came to mind was his friend Poster, whom we'll call the engineer, was an expert in electronics and mechanics. Fernando approached him with the idea, was shocked because, as far as he knew, Fernando had no criminal history or experience in theft. All he knew was that Fernando loved art and marijuana. How could someone like this plan to rob a bank? But Fernando explained the details, the idea in his mind, and how they could reach the vault through the sewer tunnels. Began to seriously consider the idea. Even though he himself had never stolen anything in his life. However, his family had suffered greatly during a period when Argentina's banking system collapsed, losing much of their savings and never getting it back. Began to see the banks as the villains in the equation. If he robbed a bank, it wouldn't be unethical from his perspective, at least not entirely. The engineer told Fernando that he was in. Together, they went to the site of the bank, explored the sewer tunnel beneath it, began calculating exactly where they would need to dig down first. Fernando brought measuring tapes and started lowering them into the sewer grates. These tapes would help them determine their exact position and distance from the surface once they were inside the tunnel. Then they sneaked into the bank, took covert photos, and observed the layout, including the vault in the basement. They estimated the size of the vault and the number of safety deposit boxes inside, hundreds of them. But despite all their calculations, everything was still approximate. They needed precise measurements, which required obtaining the blueprints of the bank building. These blueprints were likely stored in a municipal records office somewhere. Above all, they needed financial support because the tools planned to build would require money. Fernando, the leader, began searching for a new partner. To join their team, he contacted a person known only as the Doctor. This individual's identity remained unknown, and his role was more of a coordinator than an active participant in the operation. The Doctor told Fernando he would connect him with the right people to assist in the heist. The first person introduced was Beto Della Torre, whom we'll call the financier. Beto was a man with a criminal past, a gangster, and knowledgeable about weapons. Fernando, along with the Doctor, met Beto to explain the plan. Cato was excited to join, especially since the plan seemed straightforward. However, when asked about funding, Beto admitted he didn't have cash, but suggested selling a truck to finance the operation. With that, Beto became the third key member of the gang. The Doctor, as mentioned earlier, remained a mysterious figure and wasn't considered a core member, since he acted as a coordinator rather than an active participant. Fernando, the leader, still needed a fourth person, a strong, hands-on worker, as would be busy crafting tools and dealing with personal matters. Additionally, Beto, the financier, was older and slower, making him less suitable for physical tasks. The Doctor suggested another individual, Luis, nicknamed the Violent One. Luis was a seasoned gangster with extensive experience in correlated crimes and had served time in some of the toughest prisons. Despite his fiery temper, Luis was intelligent, skilled in acting and deception, and would play a crucial role in the operation. Now, the gang was complete. Fernando, the leader, the engineer, Beto, the financier, and Luis, the Violent One. The four of them delved into the details of the operation. They descended into the sewer tunnel together, reviewed their calculations, and finalized their plans. As previously mentioned, they needed precise measurements, which required obtaining the bank's blueprints. Surprisingly, Luis volunteered to retrieve them. "Leave it to me," he said confidently. True to his word, a few days later, he returned with the blueprints, though no one knew how he obtained them. With the blueprints in hand, they calculated the exact location where they needed to dig inside the sewer tunnel, taking into account the tunnel's length and the angle at which they needed to tilt their path. They drew up a detailed map with all the necessary calculations for the digging operation. Next, they gathered the tools they needed: a diesel-powered generator, digging equipment, and large trolleys. They began digging alongside the sewer tunnel. Someone was always stationed above ground to monitor the situation and ensure the sound of digging didn't reach the outside. This digging process would take several months. Now, they had to address the next challenge: the heat sensors and alarm systems that would trigger if they detected body heat. To counter this, Sebastian designed special suits made from materials used for camping and mountain climbing. He also purchased a thermal camera to test whether it could detect body heat through the suits. While the suit idea worked, it was still risky. If they moved too much inside the vault or carried too many tools, the sensors might still pick up their heat signatures. Overall, the plan remained highly dangerous. Frustrated, Fernando continued to brainstorm alternative solutions. One day, a crazy idea struck him. Scazed. Until now, he had been fixated on robbing the bank while it was closed, entering through the tunnel and leaving unnoticed. But what if they combined both methods? Instead of using the tunnel for entry, they would use it for escape. By doing so, the heat sensors and alarms would become irrelevant. The police would surround the bank from the outside, unaware that the robbers would flee underground. Fernando believed he was the first person in the world to come up with this idea, though similar tactics had been used in other famous heists, such as the 1995 bank robbery in Germany by Khalid, the Brazilian. Regardless, Fernando shared the idea with his team, and they were all astonished and excited now. They needed to add weapons and equipment to their arsenal. Pito, the financier, took charge of acquiring the weapons, leveraging his gang connections and expertise in the field. Keep in mind, however, that these weapons had a unique feature. We'll reveal it at the end of the story, so stay tuned. Over the course of about a year, they completed digging the tunnel and constructed a small dam inside the sewer tunnel. The purpose of the dam was to raise the water level to a certain height so they could use small inflatable boats inside the tunnel. They knew that carrying their loot on foot would be impossible, as half their bodies would be submerged in water, slowing them down significantly. The dam ensured the water level was high enough for the boats to move freely. Next, they planned their escape route. Initially, they considered fleeing toward the drainage outlet, but they soon realized that the police would likely head straight there once they understood what was happening. Instead, they studied the opposite direction and discovered it was a much better option. Along this route, there were hundreds of sewer grates spaced every 10 meters. After studying the reverse route, they identified a specific grate located about 200 meters from the bank. They decided to use a van, parking it directly above the chosen grate. High in the van's floor, they cut an opening that aligned perfectly with the sewer grate below. This way, they could emerge from the sewer directly into the van without being seen. True to plan, Beto acquired a small van and parked it in his garage. The gang gathered in his garage to modify the van and cut the hole in its floor. While they were working, Beto's wife walked in. Everyone turned to Beto and asked, "What's your wife doing here?" Beto reassured them, saying, "Don't worry, she knows nothing. Trust me, everything is fine." This was the first and only time the gang members met her. Another mysterious figure, known only as the Kid, was responsible for driving the van and waiting for them after the heist. Everything was nearly ready. The only thing left was figuring out how to quickly open the safety deposit boxes inside the vault. There were hundreds of boxes, and manually opening them would take too long. To solve this, the engineer created a hydraulic tool they nicknamed the cannon. This device could smash open a safety deposit box in just 7 seconds per box, allowing them to open approximately 400 boxes within 2 hours. Finally, after months of preparation, everything was set. The sewer tunnel they would enter through, the tunnel they dug leading to the bank, the vault containing the safety deposit boxes, and the basement all meticulously planned. 200 meters away was the sewer grate they would emerge from, with the modified van parked directly above it for their escape. The gang decided to execute the operation on January 13, 2006. The engineer was the only one who entered the sewer tunnel and positioned himself near the entrance of the tunnel they had dug. The small inflatable boats and tools, including the cannon, were ready. He climbed through the tunnel until he reached the wall of the bank behind the vault and waited for his teammates' signal. Meanwhile, Fernando, Beto, and Luis positioned themselves in front of the bank's entrance, ensuring everyone was in place. Once they confirmed everything was ready, they stormed the bank, weapons raised. They immediately took control of the customers and employees inside, ordering them to lie face down on the ground. The security guard in the monitoring room locked himself in and alerted the police. Within minutes, patrol cars arrived at the scene. At this point, Fernando began enacting a pre-planned performance he called the Coco Plan. The idea was to take one of the hostages, pretend to attempt an escape, but quickly return inside once they saw the police surrounding the area. The goal was to convince the police commander that the robbers were trapped with no other exit. Side the bank, the robbers had full control of the situation, except for one problem. The security guard remained locked in the monitoring room and was in direct contact with the police. If he saw them leaving, he would alert the police, ruining their escape. They tried negotiating with the guard. Luis, the violent one, assured him he wouldn't be harmed if he opened the door. But the guard refused, insisting he wouldn't surrender. Luis then grabbed one of the female bank employees, held a gun to her head, and threatened to kill her if the guard didn't comply. The guard remained steadfast, but the employee, who knew Luis from previous interactions, began pleading with the guard, crying and saying she wanted to see her daughter again. Moved by her tears, the guard finally relented. "Okay, I'll come out, but don't hurt anyone," he said, opening the door and surrendering his weapon. Luis thoroughly searched him, confiscated his phone, and instructed him to leave. The guard exited with his hands raised, surrendered to the police and special forces surrounding the area. The operation commander questioned the guard about the situation inside. The guard reported seeing 3 armed robbers holding approximately 30 hostages. He mentioned that one of the robbers was communicating with someone outside via phone. Meanwhile, Fernando contacted who was waiting in the tunnel outside the vault. Fernando instructed him to breach the wall, began drilling from the outside, and soon heard the sound of movement on the other side. It was Fernando, moving a filing cabinet that was positioned directly over the spot was working on. Every moment, feared they had drilled in the wrong place. Finally, entered the vault with the hydraulic tools and began opening the safety deposit boxes. The next 2 hours, they aimed to open as many boxes as possible, estimating around Sipai. Y and Fernando worked in the vault. Luis and Beto maintained control over the hostages upstairs, trying to stall the police for the full 2 hours they had planned. Luis, the violent one, was a master of deception and acting. His performance even caught the attention of the media covering the event live. They referred to him as the man in the gray suit. Even the operation commander was baffled by how this man spoke to them with such confidence. During one call, Luis said, "Look, we came to rob the bank and planned to escape quickly, but you surrounded us faster than expected. We don't want to hurt anyone, but now we don't know what to do." The commander, watching through binoculars, was amazed by Luis's composure. Luis continued, "Listen, I just got out of prison after serving 15 years, and this isn't my first robbery. I know how these procedures work, and things could get ugly for the hostages. Don't push us too far." Commander, now convinced Luis was in control, agreed not to escalate the situation. Among the amusing moments during the heist, Luis and Beto discovered that one of the hostages was an elderly woman celebrating her birthday. They went to the bank's small kitchen, brought out a cake, sang happy birthday to her while the other hostages joined in, throwing flour on the floor. In the end, they told her they would give her a birthday gift at their release. True to their word, they let her go. This story was mentioned in several sources, adding to the strangeness of the event. Throughout the ordeal, Luis continued to mislead the police with creative stories, even pretending to be the gang's lawyer during a phone call. When the 2 hours were up, and Fernando, exhausted and overheated, emerged from the vault with as much loot as they could carry, they had collected a fortune that would last them a lifetime. Fernando contacted Luis, instructing him to begin the escape plan. Luis delivered the final act of deception, calling the police and requesting pizza before surrendering. He gave them the address of a distant pizzeria to buy them more time. After the call, Luis cut off all communication. He and Beto ordered the hostages to remain face down, threatening to shoot anyone who moved. Meanwhile, Fernando placed their weapons on a small mat on the floor before exiting through the tunnel. They covered the hole with the filing cabinet and placed a fake bomb to delay discovery. They quickly boarded the inflatable boats, transferred the loot, and navigated the sewer tunnel to the predetermined exit point. Climbing out through the grate, they entered the waiting van through the hole in its floor. The van, spacious enough to accommodate both the gang and their loot, drove away unnoticed. They headed to a safe house they had prepared in advance. Upon arrival, they unloaded the loot and immediately turned on the TV to watch the news, laughing as they saw the police still surrounding the bank, unaware of their escape. Eventually, the police discovered the hole behind the filing cabinet, but found only a fake bomb. Meanwhile, the gang relaxed at the safe house, celebrating their success. They divided the loot visually, as counting it would take too long. Their haul included a small mountain of cash, gold, and jewelry, estimated at $19 million, making this the largest bank heist in Argentina's history. Each member took their share and went their separate ways, vowing never to see each other again. For a while, they lived comfortably, but one of them, Beto, the financier, faced trouble shortly after. When Beto returned home, his wife and children eagerly awaited him, thrilled about their newfound wealth. That night, they celebrated lavishly. However, a few days later, Beto noticed one of the loot bags was missing from the storeroom. Upon inspecting it, he discovered a large bundle of cash was gone. Confronting his wife, she admitted to taking 5 or 6 small bags, approximately $300,000. Furious, Beto demanded she return the money, but she refused, leading to a heated argument. Eventually, Beto decided to hide the remaining loot elsewhere. Unbeknownst to him, his wife, driven by jealousy, went to the police and reported him, believing he had taken the money for a secret lover. Ironically, Beto loved his family deeply and would never betray them. Following Beto's arrest, the authorities gradually uncovered the identities of the other 3 robbers. Despite their efforts to evade capture, all 4 were eventually arrested. Fernando, the leader, was found hiding in a tent in a remote area, while Luis fled to Uruguay but was captured there. The engineer was the easiest to catch, apprehended in his own home. During their trial, it was revealed that most of the stolen goods were never recovered. The robbers had hidden them in secure locations and refused to disclose their whereabouts. Surprisingly, their sentences were relatively light, ranging from 9 to 15 years, but none served the full term. Fernando served about 6 years, while Beto served 8. The reason for the lenient sentences was that their weapons were fake, reducing the charges from armed robbery to unarmed robbery. The stolen money was never fully recovered, raising suspicions of secret deals between the robbers and authorities to secure early releases. The bank compensated the affected customers through insurance. Dramatic film and a documentary were made about the heist. In the documentary, the 4 robbers appeared unrepentant, proudly recounting their operation and seemingly living comfortable lives. What ultimately happened to the money remains unclear. That concludes our story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more incredible content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, Tatsi. You tomorrow.